I used to be a process server and I have a lot of interesting stories from that job. I have a couple that really scared me. This is one of the stories that really scared me. The experience that confirmed that I should always trust my gut. I went to an apartment building to serve someone who lived there. When I was walking up to the building, there was an older man sitting on the bench right next to the front door. He had a cane next to him. He was friendly and said hello. I said hello back, and initially, my guard was down, so I started some small talk with him. I attempted to open the front door, but it ended up being locked. So I explained to the man that I was a process server, and I was attempting to give some papers to someone that lived in the building. He started going on about how he had a daughter my age, and that he wouldn't be comfortable with her being a process server because it wasn't a safe job. He also said it must be extra unsafe for me because I'm so small. I was 5'2", and at the time, I was 110 pounds. I instantly started to feel like something was off. I also thought that maybe I was being overdramatic because this was an older man who has to use a cane. I felt like it was almost rude to be cautious of someone like that. I still had a job to do, and I wasn't going to let this deter me from doing that. So I asked the man if he was willing to let me into the apartment building. He said he would. It seemed like it took him some effort to stand up and walk towards the door with his cane, so I started to feel like I had been overreacting. The man opened the door for me and I walked into the building. I was about to go up the stairs, but the man insisted I take the elevator. I started to feel very uneasy, but for some reason I agreed to take the elevators anyway. I thought the man would leave me alone if I took his suggestion. I started to walk over to the elevator and he followed me. He continued to talk to me. He asked me about my job and life. I was trying to be vague. When I got to the elevator, the man also got onto the elevator. At this point, I froze because I didn't understand why he had followed me. The man was standing closer to the back wall of the elevator, and I was standing closer to the door. I didn't want to make eye contact with him in that enclosed space alone, but I was watching him in the reflection on the shiny metal door. I asked him why he got into the elevator with me, and he said that he was watching out for me. When the man said this, I could clearly see that his head was facing me, and it moved down, staring at the floor where my feet were, and then slowly up like he was looking at my body from top to bottom. I started to feel claustrophobic and that I needed to get off the elevator now. The elevator door opened and I practically jumped out. I told the man that he needed to stay there because I wanted to respect the privacy of the person that I was serving papers to. I then told the man to have a nice day because I felt like that was what I needed to say the whole time to end the conversation without him continuing the conversation. The man just nodded at me. I get off the elevator and begin to walk down the hallway looking for the right apartment number that is listed in the documents that were in my hands. I continue walking and I feel this sensation like I'm being watched, but I don't want to turn around because I'm too afraid that I'll see the man standing there. I end up having to walk around the corner and further down the hallway. The feeling of being watched goes away, and I know it's because there's now a wall between me and whoever's eyes I could feel watching my back. I get to the right apartment and knock on the door. There's no answer. I knock again, but this time much louder. Then I wait about 30 seconds and give the door 4 sturdy knocks before waiting patiently. I couldn't hear anyone in the apartment. No TV, no pets, no microwave running, just nothing. I finally believe that this person's not home. I accept a fee. I'm a little annoyed that I went through all of this just to arrive at this person's apartment and them not even being home. I start to walk back the way I came from. I turn the corner of the hallway and what comes into view makes my stomach sink. The man is standing there, one hand on his cane and the other hand hovering in front of the elevator button. I keep walking while a bunch of different thoughts are running through my head. When I start to approach the elevator, the man asks, "How did it go?" I simply answered, "They weren't home." The man says, "I've been waiting for you here." There's something about the way this man said this. I knew I shouldn't get on the elevator with this man again. I basically did a drive-by and started walking fast past him. I told him, "Have a nice day, I'm in a hurry." I didn't even wait for a reply and continued to move quickly past the elevator towards the staircase. Once I reached the stairs, I'm not sure why, but I started running down them. Once I got down the case of stairs, I heard a loud, "Wait!" I looked back once and I could see the man on top of the staircase. He's now carrying his cane, and he began running down the stairs after me. He wasn't using his cane to descend down the stairs, and he was moving way faster than he had previously. I turned away and ran as fast as I could down the stairs without falling down. I started to jump down 2 stairs at a time. I knew that he was close behind me because I could hear his loud feet as he was running down behind me. I reached the bottom of the stairs and almost ran into another resident of the building. I apologized and felt panic when I realized that the guy was probably right behind me. I looked behind me and the man was using his cane again to get down the last few steps. I looked back at the other resident and they had a puzzled look on their face. I mumbled, "Have a nice day," and booked it out of the apartment building and straight to my car. I didn't check to see if the man was following me, but something in my gut told me that the other resident present had helped me. When I reached my car, I practically jumped into it. I slammed the car door and locked it right away. I started my car and pulled out of the lot quickly. The parking lot required me to drive past the front door of the apartment building. I looked over to see if there was any sign of the man, and there he was. He had stepped outside of the front door and was standing there, leaning on his cane and smiling at me driving by. He then gave me a slow wave. I don't know why, but I gave him a tight-lipped smile. For some reason, I still felt like I had to be nice, even though something obviously really messed up just happened. But at least I was in my locked car, driving away, and he had no way to catch up with me. This happened shortly after bars were reopening after COVID lockdowns. I went to a dive bar near 82nd Ave in Portland, Oregon, a real shithole, but they were one of the only bars that had karaoke that early after the lockdowns eased. I sang my song and walked over to the bar for a drink. I'm chatting with the bartender when this man approaches me. I'm a large man, 6'2", a little over 200 pounds, but this guy dwarfed me. He was probably 6'6", and easily 280 pounds or more, probably around 30 to 35 years old. He was huge and muscular. He was wearing a face mask, very common, but he was the only one in the bar doing it. He had been wearing this mask long enough that it was dirty, and the part of the mask in the front of his mouth was visibly wet from saliva. It was pretty gross. He had very cold, dead eyes. He asked me if I lifted weights. I did, and questioned me about how much I could bench and squat, etc. He came off socially awkward immediately, but no big deal. He then bragged about how much he could lift. He could bench something like 350 pounds, he said, and at one point he even did a bodybuilding pose, flexing his arms on both sides and encouraging me to squeeze them. I played along and did. He seemed weird, possibly on the spectrum, but shady dive bars are filled with weird people, so I indulged him and let him talk. The convo continued, and he said some more strange things, which I just tried to listen to non-judgmental. He told me that he used to be a professional baseball player and police officer. He told me about his drinking habit, and how he drank 25 beers that day. Not impossible for a dude that size. At this point, I feel like this guy is very strange. Probably completely full of shit, and he even makes me a little uncomfortable. I maintain a calm demeanor because I was also curious of what else he had to say. That's when he shifted to talking about women. He said he noticed how I talked to the female bartender, how we had a nice rapport. He asked me about how I talk to women, what kind of things I talk about, and then came the first red flag when he said, "But how do you get them to trust you?" I tried to keep a straight, non-judgmental face, though that was a rather alarming question. At this point, I didn't think that he was dangerous, but I didn't feel good about teaching someone how to behave to gain someone's trust. I also felt like I needed to keep him talking. So I said generic things about being honest and caring, as opposed to things to do or say. Then it gets weirder. He asked me if I like anal sex. I said, I don't know, as at that point I had never tried it. He tells me that he likes it a lot. It's his preferred kind of sex. Then he continued saying he likes to go to the mall and pick up young women, 18 or 19, he said, which is right on the edge of legal, and I immediately wondered if he went younger. He said he'd buy them things and then try to get them to come back to his truck where he'd have anal sex with them, implying that it was consensual, but I had my doubts. At this point, I'm convinced that I'm talking to a psychopath and a rapist, and alarm bells are going off like crazy, but I wanted to get him to admit to a crime so I could try to tell the authorities something substantive. Then the final straw that made me lose my cool. He looked at me and said slowly, "I've done bad things." He looks down. "I've done some really bad things." I'm freaking out inside, but I want him to tell me. I ask him as cool and non-judgmental as possible, what kind of bad things? But my body language must have communicated that I was neither cool or non-judgmental, and he shut down. Convo ended shortly after. I went home that night and looked up the name he had gave me. Surely a baseball player or a police officer would have some kind of online record, but nothing came up. I'll never forget that encounter, and I regret not figuring out a way to ID him and failing to keep my cool enough to get him to admit to a crime. I wonder if he's still out there luring young women to his truck. Be safe out there, y'all. I live on a main road in a kind of sketchy area. Not completely unsafe, but an area I've posted about before on here because some creepy stuff happened to me. But this is one of the creepiest. I had gone out around 6 for food. It had recently snowed and my city sucks at sidewalk plowing, so it's an Arctic expedition walking through the deep snow and ice. As I trudged through, I passed a man that lives in the neighborhood that can sometimes act strange. He walks oddly and can be pretty creepy at times. He passes me one way, I pass him the other, and we go our separate ways. After I got my food, walking back, I thought I saw him coming my way. I quietly, out loud said, "Oh man, not him." But then that slowly faded away. The person walked off the path towards a church on the street. This church has a big LED sign that you can hide behind. As I got closer, I realized it was a younger man, about my age, with a gray hoodie and beige cargo pants. He was acting strange. He walked like a Disney cartoon character, and his face had a big smile, with eyes shifting at 1,000,000 kilometers per hour. Then I saw as he looked at me approach, quickly pulled his hoodie over his head and stepped behind the sign, obstructing my view of him. I don't know if he saw me see him, but I realized what might be going down. I just stopped on the path. From the snow, it would have been too much to turn around and head back. My boots were getting stuck in the slushy, snowy path. I waited a few moments, and he must have realized that I knew, because he came back out from behind the sign and went up to the church windows. The church is also a community center, and there's a room facing the street that kind of looks like a dance room with a large mirror. He took off his hood and started fake dancing around in front of the window. He kept looking back as if his little distraction would have been enough to end my interest in what the fuck is happening, but it didn't. It disturbed me more. When he realized this, we made a sort of shuffle around each other. His smile disappeared, and he kept trying to inch his way towards me, but got bogged down in the same slush that I stopped in. After I got away, I just watched him as he put his hoodie up again and walked away normally towards the restaurant. This area gets stranger and stranger every day. I've had a few creepy things happen to me in my life, but this one I still think about how things could have went wrong very fast. I'm a 20-year-old female. This takes place back when I used to live in southern Indiana. Like seriously, in the sticks. It was a weekend night and my best friend and I were coming home from our graveyard shift at a local waffle joint. She decided to get her dog from her house so we could stay at my place for the night. That's important later. So we start heading out into the country where I lived, and to get to my house there's a long narrow dirt road you have to go down about a mile in or so. We see a truck's headlights. We get closer and it's a nice truck, probably like 2018 at least. He's parked to where he's sideways, blocking the whole path. Confused, I get out to ask if he's okay. He looked hopeful when he saw me at first. "I'm just waiting on a friend to come get me. My truck's stuck." He smiled at me, and I noticed his pupils were nearly completely dilated. He looks back at my car and sees that I have someone with me, and looks at the dog sticking its head out the window. His smile fades. He says, "Pit bulls are mean and nasty." He quickly turns around and gets back in his truck. I go to my friend and I'm like, "Put this shit in reverse and use whatever hood race skills you have to get the hell out of here." So we take my poor 95 caddy that really shouldn't be driving on dirt road anyway, and back all the way back down the road to get to the main road. Relieved, we take a different road home. Then, lo and behold, the same guy is parked on the road, standing off to the side smiling, just looking at our headlights. We're completely about to shit ourselves, and we gun it the rest of the way home. I don't know how he got there before us, or what his intentions were, but I'm thankful I wasn't alone, being my naive college girl self. I was at a friend's wedding where I was close to a lot of people there. I saw a friend of mine that I sometimes jump on in a playful manner and asked him for a piggyback ride, just being goofy. He agreed and was sort of dancing with me on his back. All of a sudden, I feel someone reaching behind me and grabbing my groin, not even my butt, which would have been inappropriate enough, but literally a full handful of my crotch. I jump up and look to see who it was, with a what the fuck as I did. I see that it's a woman I've met a few times, but barely know. I don't even remember her name at this time. She scoffs at me for being upset about it, kinda chuckles and says, "Relax, it's okay. I've seen you naked," before rolling her eyes and walking away like it was perfectly reasonable to grab an acquaintance's junk without warning them or consent. When I was in college, I was out and about with my then boyfriend. We had gone to dinner and went to Walmart to get the typical college food so we could survive a Sunday in. I was dressed up in a casual dressy fit. We decided to split up while shopping, maybe to shop quicker, but I don't remember what the exact reason was. I was wandering the grocery aisles when I noticed a girl who was about my age. In a friendly manner, we casually smiled at each other and continued on shopping. It didn't seem weird at first, but I kept noticing her in the same aisles as me, and a big, muscular man was never too far behind. Eventually, I texted my boyfriend and asked where he was, and continued shopping. Next thing I know, the girl approaches me and says that she loves my jacket. I say, "Thanks," and try to move on. She stops me and says something along the lines of, "Hey, you look my age and seem really nice. I just moved here for a new job and company my friend and I are starting." Then she tried to ask me questions about where I was from. I was vague and untrusting with what I said, noticing that this isn't normal. Then she said, "I'm looking for more people like you and I to work for our company. It's kind of a warehouse job, and I would love you to be one of the bookkeepers. You should give me your number." I said, "That is so nice of you to offer me a job, but I am not a desk person, and I already have a job I love." She said, "That's a bummer. I thought we might work well together. Well, would you want to give me your number so we can hang out? I would love to have a friend that could show me around the city." At that point, I realized I wasn't getting out of this situation until my boyfriend showed up, or I just gave her my number. Eventually, I rattled off a fake number and said, "Hey, I'll catch you later. I gotta go." Then I walked away praying that my boyfriend would be near so we could get the fuck out of there. While I was looking for him and trying to call him, the girl caught up to me and said, "I tried calling you, but it says the number was out of service." As I tried to come up with a quick excuse and say, maybe you typed it in wrong, she saw that my iPhone was in my hand unlocked. She quickly snatched it away and called herself on it. I was so flustered and mad at her that I snatched my phone back right away. When my boyfriend came around the corner, he instantly recognized that something was up and said that we needed to go. When the girl saw him approach me, she looked disappointed to see him and stopped trying to interact. We ended up buying nothing and leaving. That night, we called our parents and the police. The police said that they didn't think it was anything ill-intended, but I was sure it was probably trafficking. I was going to switch my phone number because I was scared. I blocked them and turned off all location access on my phone. I was too scared to go anywhere alone for a while. I even told my coach so she would know. A couple days later, I got a text from a random number. It was the girl. She sent me a picture of my best friend who was out drinking downtown with some of her other friends. The text said, "I met your best friend. She gave me your number because I told her that I was looking for new friends. She showed me a picture of you and I said, what a coincidence. I met that girl the other day and lost her number when I got a new phone." About 2 minutes later, I got a text from my best friend. I gave your number to a girl who wants to make friends around here and is asking people to join her business. Since I moved this week, I thought of you." I freaked out that she was with her and told her to get away and not to leave alone with her. I stayed up worried until my best friend got home. She said she was fine, otherwise I would have gone to go pick her up. The next day, my best friend apologized and told me to block the number. My friend and her friend group tried to ditch her, but she kept showing up to the bars that they were at. She said the girl was relentless and texted her all night trying to get my friends to go hang out at her place. My friend also said that when she asked about the business, the girl wouldn't give her many details other than it was a warehouse somewhere, would pay her great, was in town, and if she wanted a tour she would take her. We never heard from this girl again. Today I'm listening to a podcast and they mentioned different sex trafficking tactics. 2 were vague jobs, they would pay you well but need you to come meet them to give you more information, and a new town girl who desperately needs friends. I have been thinking about this all morning and I'm glad I felt uncomfortable and my friend didn't go with this girl. But I'm mostly mad at the cops for ignoring my concerns and saying it was nothing. When I was 16 years old, my best friend and I made a dumb decision to get matching tattoos from this older man who was doing tattoos illegally out of his home. He is well known in the area within our age group for giving cheap tattoos to minors. He recently had gotten out of prison for giving minors tattoos and not practicing under state guidelines. Needless to say, I don't know what the fuck we were thinking, but hey, when you're a rebellious 16-year-old, dumb as fuck, and have the chance to get a tattoo for $20, I guess any and all common sense flies out the window. So we set up a time to go over to get our tats. I don't remember exactly what time we went over, but I remember it was already dark, so it must have been late evening. It was just 3 of us alone in his house. I remember feeling very eerie being there. Something about him and the energy of his place felt very off, but being a dumb teen I chose to ignore those feelings and go through with it anyways. We were there for about 30 minutes, got our tattoos, and then left. Fast forward a few months later, I see his picture and name on the news. At first, I thought he got busted again for illegal tattooing. Little did I know it was so much worse than that. He had been arrested for one of the most heinous crimes someone could commit. Turns out, he bought an old police car, a cop costume, handcuffs, and would go out to parts of Portland that prostitutes frequented, impersonating a cop to arrest them. He brought them back to his house and chained them up in the garage where they wouldn't be heard. There, he would reportedly sexually assault them and torture them. I was absolutely sick to my stomach when I found out. I can't imagine what these women went through, and I still really don't want to know the details. This was all happening around the same time that we went to his house, so the chances that one of the victims was there around the same time that we were could be a possibility. I thank God that nothing happened to us, but there's also a part of me that feels guilt. What if someone was screaming for help while we were there, and we just couldn't hear them? Why didn't he kidnap us? We would have been perfect targets. Every time I look at the tattoo, it's a horrible reminder of what could have happened, so I'm planning on getting it covered up. Thankfully, all of his victims were alive, and I hope and pray that they're able to recover from this horrible act. Always trust your gut. Update: he had a whole setup where he would record his acts. I was told that there were multiple victims, but it looks like only one had been confirmed to be taken back to his home. Who knows how many more victims there were. Sadly, the demographic of women he was targeting are less likely to come forward. Turns out he didn't get a life sentence after all. Dude was somehow able to get a plea deal and is serving 30 years. I'm disgusted thinking that he'll be free again one day. This happened back in the 80s, so very much the pre-cell phone era. I was in high school at the time. One night after dinner, my mom suggests we take a walk around the block to walk off dinner. My dad and brother were watching TV and opted to stay home, so it was just us girls. We lived out in the fringe of suburbs, in a subdivision that was semi-rural. By that I mean there were houses, but no streetlights or sidewalks. Everyone had septic tanks and there was no sewer service, etc. The houses were all well back from the road and the lots were wooded. Anyway, we're walking around the block, which is about 1.5 miles in total. We're almost back home. It's pitch black that night, no moon, and we had our flashlights to use as needed. Without it, you couldn't see much past a foot or two around you. We mainly used them to signal if a car went by, but there wasn't really anyone around, so we had them switched off and we're just walking and chatting. Just as we turned the corner onto our street, we suddenly heard footsteps behind us. This was a bit weird as we had just came from that area and we hadn't seen or heard anyone walking around the street or coming down the driveways as we passed. We figured it was just some neighbor also out for a walk and we hadn't noticed them in the dark. So I turned around to look and switched the flashlight on to see who it was. They immediately switched the flashlight on too, so I could only see their light and not them. They said nothing, kept walking, but the footsteps behind us sped up now. They sounded heavy, so we thought it was a man. We sped up. He sped up. I turned the flashlight back and he turned his on once again in silence. We were too scared to call out, and now we were approaching our driveway. As we got there, I pushed my mom in front and told her to get up the driveway, which was steep and long. Once she had a start, I sprinted up after her. As I did, the footsteps veered away to the other side of the road and just kept going. Nothing was ever said by this person, and normally people here waved and spoke out when walking or even driving by. When we got up to the house, my dad said it was probably just a neighbor, so my brother and I got in the car and drove around to see who it was. No one was out there. We went around the roads and no one was walking on them. There wasn't time for him to leave the area. Either it was a nasty neighbor getting off scaring us and then ducking into a house, or whoever it was came out of the woods behind us and then disappeared back into them. We had just moved back to my home state and my husband's birthday was coming up. I went to the local Dollar Tree to get balloons and a card, but this location didn't have helium for the balloons. I typed in the next available location in maps and drove there. I wasn't familiar with that area, so when I arrived, and it was a pretty sketchy part of town, I told myself to be quick and vigilant. I made a note of all the cars around, and I parked as close to the front as I could. When I went inside, I made a note of every person inside too. I was carrying my knife and pepper spray. I had no bad vibes, no creeps lingering, thought I was in the clear. I got my balloons and card within 5 minutes. Nobody new entered the store. I get outside and no cars have changed in the parking lot. I packed the balloons in my car, got in, locked my doors by default right as I turned my engine on, and a car out of nowhere speeds up and blocks the whole front end of my car at an angle. The guy starts motioning me to roll down my windows. I tried to ignore them and plan my escape, but a car was on my right, another car was backing up, so I couldn't reverse. The guy kept pulling in closer at an angle to box me in and kept throwing hand gestures for me to roll down my window. When suddenly the car to my right moved, I whipped my wheel to the right as fast as I could and pulled out inches from scraping my car on the creep's car. I only lived about 10 minutes or so away, so I drove around for 45 minutes, taking all different roads to be certain that I wasn't being followed before finally going home. My adrenaline was so high. I really was surprised because I had no idea where that car came from. So this was a few years back when I was walking home from my friend's house after hanging out with her after school. It was around 9:30 p.m. in the summer, so the sun had set for the most part. It was relatively dark but still bright enough where I could make out things around me. I was stoned and was walking very slowly down the road to my house, which was about a 20-minute walk away from my friend's house. The majority of my walk was spent on a straight, quiet suburban street that was very familiar to me, as I had done this walk plenty of times before. After about 5 minutes of walking, I noticed the first and only car drive past. It was an old, beat-up, white Honda, which I didn't take much notice of until a few minutes passed, and it drove past again. Still, I wasn't concerned and continued my walk, admiring the cracks in the pavement or doing whatever else a stoned 14-year-old does on a walk. Another minute passes and the car drives past again, this time more slowly, and I feel my stomach drop. I couldn't make out who was inside, but I knew something was off. I've always been very timid, so I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia and that I was just being dramatic, until it drives past again about 2 minutes later and parks maybe 10 feet in front of me. As I approached the car, I kept my head down, but I hear, "Hey there." And sure enough, I look up and there's this rough-looking man who you could tell from just the appearance alone smelled like stale cigarettes and body odor. He was sitting in his driver's seat smiling at me. The lack of teeth and dirty shirt this man had on gave me a horrible vibe, so I just gave him a smile back and continued walking. I look up and notice he's driving alongside me. He asked if I had directions to the nearest gas station. I stopped and pointed in the general direction and told him where to go, that it was less than a 5-minute drive away. When out of nowhere he just started to laugh. I kinda just stared in confusion and fear as he squinted his eyes at me like he was trying to get a better look at my face. Then he said, "I'll take a guess, but I could tell from those eyes you've been smoking pot, little miss." I kinda just laughed and tried to walk away when he said, "Come back," so I stopped in my tracks. Why I didn't just keep walking is beyond me, but I turned around and he pulls out a rather large bag of weed and asks if I want some. I tell him I'm okay and I have no money, and he says something along the lines of, "I don't need your money, take it." I reassure him that I'm fine and I don't need it and try to continue walking, but nonetheless, he continued driving alongside me. He then asked me if I needed a ride home and tells me that it's too dark to be walking alone, which really frightened me. He continued trying to convince me to get into his car, and I became more and more unsettled. I began looking for the closest house with a light on, and after finding one, I tell him, "This is my house, good night." I walk up the stranger's driveway and walk straight into their home. There's a middle-aged couple sitting in the living room, and they looked extremely shocked and equally angry. I just started to sob out of shock and relief and apologized profusely. I explained to them what just happened, and the very kind lady assured me that I did the right thing and gave me a ride home. Looking back, I probably should have knocked, but I was scared, under the influence, and still a child, and the homeowners were very understanding. Still one of the scariest things to ever happen to me, but I'm glad I trusted my gut and got away from the man whose intentions seemed anything but pure. I consider myself lucky that I got away. Yesterday, my 8-year-old daughter and I took our pup out for her 2 p.m. walk, just like every day. Being on schedule is good for my dog, yet I may have to switch it up now. But a guy in my complex asked me to take a picture of my dog for his friend, and I said sure. So he runs down and started a whole photo shoot. He told us all to get in the picture, which we ignored. No need to take a picture of my 8-year-old. You got permission to take a picture of my dog. He kept saying, "Oh, I can get a better picture than that." Here I was, just getting more and more uncomfortable. Like my dog is high energy, she wants to get going, and so do I. Finally, he seems happy with the picture and says to wait, he has cookies. It wasn't clear if they were for my daughter or dog, but I was done with this interaction. I said, "No thanks, my daughter has a kid's party to attend." He looked defeated and asked me if I was sure. I said yep, gotta go, and we hustled out of there. This could be innocent, but it really felt odd, and I have a very unique looking dog who always has her face in the window, so it would be very easy for him to pinpoint where I live, and everyone has keys to our first door since we live in the same entrance as the basement storage. We still have 2 locked doors after the first door, but I feel unnerved. We live like a 1-minute walk from this guy's house. I just want to see what you guys think about this. Is it weird or am I just paranoid? Update, today my husband was walking our dog and he passed 2 guys. They crossed the street and sped up, walking towards my husband. My dog kept looking back and pulling my husband, so when they got close, my husband flipped out his switchblade and they turned and quickly walked away. I don't know if this is related at all, but some of you suggested the original creepy dude might be trying to steal my dog, so I don't know if that's what they were hoping to do, but it's sending shivers down my spine. My husband didn't even look back at these guys, so he can't tell me what they look like. I've heard this story so many times, but I've honestly never thought it would happen to me. Last night I was doing some Christmas shopping alone at TJ Maxx. I'm a 35-year-old female. I rarely go shopping alone, especially in the evening. I usually have my kids or my husband with me. I am browsing around aimlessly, kind of just all over the store, not sure what I'm gonna get. I see this young guy, probably early 20s, skinny with glasses. Don't think anything of it. Went to a different spot and see him again. He's in the same aisle picking up stuff and looking at it and putting it back. No cart or anything. My red flags were not raised yet. Then I see him a third time in a different area, doing the same thing, but now he's stopping and texting someone. My senses start to perk up a little bit, like, okay, this is weird, but I'm not nervous yet per se, but I am more aware. Then it happened again, and this time I knew something was weird. He was following me all over the store and has nothing to buy. I start to kind of zigzag through the store and I find a coat that I want to try on. At this point, I was very wary, but I was also thinking I'm being ridiculous and paranoid, but I just had a strong sense that this was not normal. I went into the dressing room for about 15 minutes, hoping I would lose him. I came out and I didn't see him for another 20 minutes. I was relieved, thinking I was definitely being paranoid and he probably left. I go to check out after almost an hour and a half of shopping with a cart full of stuff. I was the only one online. I get called to cash out. I turn around and this man is immediately behind me in the checkout. He came out of nowhere. He had one item, a cheap little decoration. At this point, I'm full on panicking. The cashier could tell that I was being weird and very distracted. At the risk of sounding crazy, I almost didn't say anything, but I told her that I think this man was following me. She was extremely empathetic and didn't seem very surprised. She was like, "I'm so sorry. I will have someone walk you to your car." I was so thankful for her kindness. The man checked out with his one item and left the store with the older man, who I didn't see before. The older man had nothing that he bought. The parking lot in this store is a huge dark plaza. I did not want to go outside alone. I just knew it was a very bad idea. The cashier asked another employee to walk me out. She was younger than me, but so sweet. I apologized profusely. It was sleeting in cold rain, and she had no coat on. She said, "I don't care if it's downpouring, I would still walk you to your car." It was so sweet, really. She walked me all the way and waited until I pulled out and drove away. The whole time I was shaking like a leaf. Like I said, I've heard that this has happened to other women, but I kinda thought they might be paranoid or exaggerating. This is extremely scary though. The more I think about it, the creepier it gets. He followed me around the entire store, and everywhere I turned, there he was. I have no idea what his deal was, but this was so unsettling. My husband freaked out and does not want me to shop alone anymore. I don't really want to shop alone anymore either. If I had not been paying attention or dismissed my bad feelings, something bad may have happened. As a woman, being aware of your surroundings is so important. I'm a thin, athletic white guy, 5'9". Not the most intimidating presence, but I happen to have a nice bulky coat on that probably added some uncertainty. Anyway, it's 2:30 a.m. or so, and it's my favorite time to do laundry. There's a 24/7 auto-electric laundry mat right next to my apartment. While there's employees there during the business hours, there's roughly an 8-hour stretch where I'm the only one who will be in the building. I occasionally see an old-timer around 4:30, 5 a.m., but usually only on Sundays, which I avoid. It's literally a half mile from my place. I zip down there. It's a cold night, well below freezing. I toss in my clothes, soap, and swipe my laundry card. On my way to grab gas, milk, deposit at the bank, and back to my apartment to bring some things inside from my car. I do some dishes, and I decide to head back down. I'm usually playing video games while running laundry, or just procrastinate. My stuff will sit there for an hour sometimes. There's no one there to say hey, but not this time. It was just shy of 3 a.m. and I get a notification that my laundry is done on my phone, and I'm seconds from the laundromat parking lot. I pull in and scan the parking lot. No one's here. I proceed to walk to the front door and immediately notice someone came into the building from the far side door. A guy maybe 6 feet with 2 hoodies on, both hoods up, most of his face concealed. It's unlocked and often used when the place is busy, but there was no car there. There's a bathroom in the place. As I walk to the machines, which is about dead center in the building, I thought this person had quickly bolted back outside. Then I noticed him again. I think he had ducked, still just by the door. Mind you, we had 2 islands of laundry machines between us. He starts up near the wall, which is on my left. I'm watching him at this point. I was hoping he just needed to use the bathroom, but he hurried past it, not a run, but a very quick walk. Now he's on the opposite side, nearer corner of the laundry machine strip, maybe 15 feet away, and just out of my line of sight for a moment. I didn't want to trigger this guy or appear scared, so I continue shoveling my wet clothes into the laundry cart. The adrenaline begins trickling. Hairs on the back of my neck goes up. Before rounding the corner and crossing back into my vision, he had hesitated. I eventually turned my head to rotate back and he kind of popped into the picture. He glanced over and we made eye contact as I reached into my coat pocket to fist my keys. He continues up the aisle and makes a left out the side door. I have a little blade on my keys, so I popped it open and proceeded to toss my shit into the dryer while scanning my surroundings the entire time. Eventually, the time came to go outside. The front doors are automatic, so I had both hands free. I literally walked out of the place wielding a knife, shaking with adrenaline, but it was a ghost town. I proceeded to my car, went home, drove my wife into work, and I waited until 6 a.m. to grab my clothes. My conclusion is that I'm nearly positive that this person scoped out the laundromat. My machine, all of them, have digital timers for current wash. This guy entered the building within a minute of them going off, and me pulling into the lot at 3 a.m. at night when it's 20 degrees outside. Coincidence? Maybe, but I was scared either way. Okay, for starters, this happened in July of this year, and it still freaks me out. I was 23 when this happened. It was a hot afternoon and I was going home from my boyfriend's house, who lives about a 15 to 20 minute walk from my home. Since it was scorching heat, I was wearing my bike shorts and an oversized tee with sneakers. As I'm getting about 10 minutes away from my home, I put my headphones on and decide not to rush, as I didn't want to get there just yet because I was enjoying the fresh air. As I'm going to cross the street, a man in a truck, who was also across the street, began catcalling me. I ignored him and waited for the light to change. As I waited, he began getting increasingly more aggressive and overall just wouldn't shut up. The light changes and I make my way across the street. He then proceeds to honk his horn as I'm walking by and says, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Why don't you come with me for the night? I'll treat you real good." I immediately told him to leave me alone and continued on my way, but as I'm walking, he follows me with his truck and keeps trying to get me to go with him. I call my boyfriend and tell him the situation, and he FaceTimes me to see the car and the person who was following me. He then tells me to go into the store and stay there. I do as he said, and not even 2 minutes later after I walk in, the man walks in. He was looking for me. He spots me, and I immediately go to the person behind the counter and tell her the situation. She offers to let me go in the back to call the police. I told her yes and waited. He walks up to the front of the store and asks the lady if she's seen anyone with my description. She immediately says no, and if he's not going to buy anything to please leave, as she had other customers. He begins huffing and puffing, saying that he knows that he saw me. And once again she says to leave and that if he doesn't, she will call the police. That got him and he left. About 5 minutes later, my boyfriend arrives and tells me he's gonna take me home as he feels it's safer. I didn't argue and we leave the store. As we walk out, the man is right there. He looked at us and said, "Oh, so you're gonna tease me with a boyfriend?" Typical. My boyfriend immediately goes into protective mode and gets in the man's face and tells him, "If I ever see you again, if you ever breathe in our direction again, you'll regret it." He then proceeds to punch the man in the groin and walks me back to my house. Sometimes I really hate being a woman.